Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to another episode of Digging In with Tripp. And we simply wouldn't be here without the generous sponsorship of two great long-standing family-owned companies. First, Allstate Fastener, one of the leading elite fastener distributors in the world. As I keep saying, nuts and bolts, any type of fastener, because their range is unlimited. May not be sexy, but every company that manufactures in every facet seems to use a lot of them, from automotive to heavy truck to tractor trail to medical, earth moving, across the board. If you need any type of fastener help, including vendor managed inventory, contact Allstate Fastener. You can find their website at allstatefastener.com. And secondly, the great Vintage Wine Company here in the Detroit area, owned by two husband and wife combination with really remarkable palates. I've said before, palates that are very comparable to Robert Parker, one of the great wine palates in the world. The Vintage Wine Company, they are distributing world-class wines throughout the state of Michigan commercially. So if you are within the state and you would like to look at their assortment, you can find their website. That is VWCMI for Michigan.com. Thanks once again to Allstate Fastener and the Vintage Wine Company. And without further ado, thank you to my brother, Tim Tracy, with all of his musical talents, as we once again listen to his catchy created tune, Digging In with Tripp.
Everywhere around the world, they're digging in with Tripp. Young and old, boys and girls, they're digging in with Tripp. Lace 'em up, it's time to go. They're digging in with Tripp. Lace 'em up, let's start the show. We're digging in with Tripp. 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 We're digging in with Tripp today, yeah.
Now, this is pretty neat for me, in particular in the last couple of years. Stanley Cup winning general manager Brian Burke has become my friend, but also a mentor to me. He teaches me a ton. And Berkey, you've created and defined the word in Webster's dictionary, truculence, and sure, digging in with me, all the various areas that you've touched of hockey and beyond hockey. How would you define in Brian Burke's ideology digging in?
Well, to me, I'm one of 10 kids. I grew up in Minnesota, and we were taught from a very young age that hard work solved most problems. And so my first inclination with any kind of problem is if I work hard enough at this, I'll figure out a way to solve it. So digging in is a mentality that kind of comes naturally to me from my family, but also going to law school, it teaches you problem solving, right? One thing, as much as I dislike a lot of lawyers, one thing you learn that's valuable is that you, in fact, you approach it from a linear standpoint. So your client comes to you and she says, I'm here today, but I want to be here tomorrow. And you got to figure out a way to get there. And I think it's a real useful way of thinking. So digging in for me means figuring out the problem and getting her done.
Okay, and every problem seems to be unique and specific in its own way, Berkey. Every general manager of the 24 teams is trying to chase what you accomplished with the Ducks in 2007. So if you were a manager right now in the middle of training camp and then in the bubble, what would be the things that you would be emphasizing the most?
Well, right now it would be being smart between now and getting to the bubble. I think that the next 13 days are really going to determine whether this tournament is successful or not, and how disciplined and how conscientious the players are with their health. And I'm not worried about once the players get to the bubble, but I think getting there is the hard part. And players are going to have to do the right things to get there healthy. And you see the problems we're having in other sports; they're massive. So my advice to them would be you finish practice, you go back to your hotel or you go back to your house if you live here. You don't stop at McDonald's on the way. You don't stop at a bar after practice tonight. You go home and you stay home. And be disciplined for 2 weeks, and then hopefully 24 more days once we get to the bubble, and then you're past the first round. So in terms of play, what I would say to the coaches is we got to figure out a way to get conditioning levels up and foot speed and battle levels up without getting guys hurt, because it's a very short training camp. And from reading the clips, first couple of days, that's what the coaches have done. They've intermixed the workouts with breaks, then a hard skate, then power play. So I think they're doing a smart thing. I know about style of play. What I would tell my coach is, look, first game, best of 5. We just don't want to be down 2-0 at the end of the first period. So we'll play a simple first period, pucks deep, pucks out, everything's safe. Let's feel our way into the game, and then we can start taking over as we go. So,
Berkey, from all the different places you managed, from Hartford to Vancouver to winning a cup in Anaheim and Toronto, were you a guy that ever, as the general manager, went down into the room? Stylistically, what was your approach to that? And did you have any good stories, the rare time that you may have done it?
Well, I never went in during a game, but I did. I was very close to my players. I did meet with the team always at the end, before training camp. Here's what we expect. Then after training camp, last cuts, usually at a waiver draft, and you'd explain that we picked this guy up, but we didn't do anything because we believe in the group. And then I'd talk about the season's goals and what the rules are, and put some armor on the coach, say the coach is always right. And then hopefully, again, after the trade deadline, here's what we did, here's why we did it, or here's what we didn't do, because I didn't do much on the deadline usually. And then at the end of the year. But other than that, it would be extraordinary for me to go in. So my first year in Vancouver, we were playing, I'm pretty sure it was Calgary. We were at home, and the game just slipped away from us. So we were down 3-1 in the third. They got 2 quick goals. The next thing you know, it's 7-1, and our team was just flatter than piss on a plate and just quit. And I went in and yelled at him after the game. I said, we're professional athletes. We can't quit. We don't quit. We never do that. And especially at home, where our fans paid big dough to watch you guys play. And so I was determined not to swear that time. I said, this will be the first time a GM talks to a team and doesn't swear. And I didn't even get through the first sentence. I said, guys, we're bleeping professionals. I didn't even get through the first sentence.
I'm jumping around a bit.
Tripp, the best team meeting I ever had, I had 2 that I think players would say. I think it was my 3rd year in Vancouver. And the year before, we'd had a great start, and we were expected to be a good team. And this year we had a terrible start. And so we're like, 4-8-1 and hopelessly out of a playoff position in November. So I had a meeting with the team, and I put a list up of things: winning faceoffs, jumping loose pucks, winning battles, all the things we did to be successful the year before. And then I did a column next to it with all the stuff we're doing: losing faceoffs, losing battles. And I went through the list for the team. And I said to the guys, so what do we do? How do we fix this? I said, so I'm going to tell you one thing right now. I'm not touching this room. I had 2 guys in the room that had ice time issues and had asked me about getting traded. Drake Barahowski, I think, was one, and someone else. And I said, you 2 are excluded. But I said, the rest of you guys, I'm not touching this room because I believe in you, which makes me either the dumbest bastard in Western Canada or the smartest. And that team played from that point on at a 730 clip, roughly, winning percentage, and finished with 100 points. The other one was we had to make the playoffs in Calgary. We had 7 games left. And we played in Nashville. We had to win 5 of the 7 games, and I think, to make it. And I met with the team in Nashville and said, guys, we have 7 hours. That's all I'm asking from you over the next 10 days is 7 hours. 7 hours of excellence, 7 hours of compete, 7 hours. And we won 5 of the games and made the playoffs. So a couple times you can't have an impact on your team as a GM, but I think every time you go in the room, you take a little armor off the coach, because the players are thinking, well, if he's the boss, then the coach really isn't the boss. So you got to do it sparingly, but I think it can be effective.
Well, you mentioned Western Canada in one of the two spots where you mentioned Vancouver, and you did something. It's well documented. Really, you could absolutely argue you're responsible for the two greatest magical moments in first round history with regards to doing what you want to accomplish in the draft. Can you start from the origin of when you eventually drafted the Sedins together in '99? Because you set up the Canucks for a generation.
Yeah, the whole story would take a half hour, so let me give you the abridged version. First off, I never talk about the Twins without giving credit to the two people that I think deserve it most. Thomas Sedin, who spotted these kids first, and Mark Crawford, who turned them into players. The origin of it was, so everyone's talking about these twins. And so their draft years is 1999, I want to say. Yeah. And so their draft year, the World Juniors are in Winnipeg. So we had, when the World Juniors are in Canada, we bring our whole scouting staff. So we got like 12 people in Winnipeg. And it was minus 40 the whole time, the whole tournament. And they finished second and third in the tournament in scoring. But they got all their points against, Germany and Austria and, the weaker sisters in the tournament. Against the U.S. and Canada, they weren't very good. So if you remember, Tripp, that's the worst first round in the history of the National Hockey League. If you go look at the picks, it was the worst first round ever. So when I left Winnipeg, I told our scouts, look, it was clear we were going to have a high pick. I said, look, I'm trading the pick, guys. And that breaks your heart because these scouts worked so hard for their one day in the sun. But I was going to trade the pick. And then in April, season ended, and Team Sweden announced their roster for the World Championships, and the Twins were on it. So I remember saying out loud, I got the fax in the morning. I know young people be, what's a fax? I got a fax from the Swedes, and the Twins are on it. And I said out loud in my office to myself, it was 5:30 in the morning. I always go in early. I said, who got hurt? So then Thomas Sedin called me right after 6, because he knew I was in at 6 every day. And he said, did you see the rosters? And I said, yeah, who got hurt? And he said, nobody got hurt. And I said, well, Tripp, that tournament, they don't take boys to that tournament. You can count on two hands the number of 18-year-olds that have played in that tournament. I think the Twins might have been 17 at the time. But anyway, they take men to that tournament. They don't take 18-year-olds. So Thomas said, you've got to come and watch them play. And I had not planned on going to the World Championships that year. So I said, okay, I'm going to come. It was in Norway. I'm going to come, and we'll agree we'll stop all this foolishness, okay, after I come and watch them. He said, okay, but you got to come with an open mind. So they played in Hamar, which is a 2-hour drive from Oslo. And Tripp, the first shift, you could see the twin thing. I don't know what else to call it. I've had lines that clicked. I had the West Coast Express line. Marcus Naslund, Tabertuzzi, Brendan Morrison, they seem to read each other really well, but not like the Twins. So, one of them would throw a blind pass into an open area, no one near the puck. The other one would skate right onto it, right on his tape. So I was like, oh, Christ. And I was hooked. So I watched them play 3 games. And I came back and I told Dave Nonis, who was my assistant GM, I said, we got to get these kids together. He goes, nobody's ever drafted twice in the top 3 years. What are you talking about? It's nonsense. So we made a deal with Chicago to get 4, traded Brian McCabe in a first, and I loved Brian McCabe, still do, but at the time I loved him. He's a really important player for us. So this was a very expensive deal. Then we had 3 and 4. Chicago had the 4th pick. Then I traded 4 to Tampa for number 1, and then that was on the floor. We did that deal on the floor before the draft started. And then I traded the first pick overall to Atlanta for a 3rd. And so they went up and took Patrick Stefan, who was a good player but got concussed. And I took the Twins next. And that's why they wear number 22 and 33.
That's awesome. I sit here and think, because the majority of my years, Berkey in Carolina, Jimmy Rutherford, of course, now in Pittsburgh, was my general manager. And, Jimmy, stylistically, for the most part, he might go to an Odd World Junior, but for the most part, it would be our amateur scouts and director of amateur scouting that would go. My question to you, and then I'll get into your magical Pronger stuff when you took him in Hartford in '93. How did you empower your scouts, but it seemed like you would leave your NHL team quite a bit to want to go see these players with your own eyes, and that was central to eventually making the deal for the Sedins.
Yeah, I think there were 4 drafts in a row in Vancouver where we didn't draft one player that played for us. We just had 4 bad years, and I like the picks. I've gone back and dissected it. We go back, and based on the information we had, we did the right research. We made the wrong call, obviously, but I liked our style. I liked our system, how we got to those picks. It was intact. We just changed some personnel after that and got better at it. But you have to trust your scouts. They have a very difficult job. But yeah, I want to see the first and second round pick if I can. I want to see them. So I went to the World Junior every year when it was in Canada, most years in Europe. When you're with a West Coast team, and Tripp, you wouldn't appreciate this, I don't think. Being in Carolina, you guys travel a lot because you're on one coast, obviously, but you don't travel like the Western Conference teams. I mean, there is so much travel there that your team will go on a 5 or 6 game road trip. And what you do is you go and scout for the first 5 days of that trip, 6 days of that trip, 7 days of that trip. So you go through the Ontario Hockey League, and then you meet the team in Toronto for their last game, and you fly home on the charter to save money. You jump on the bird. It doesn't cost any extra money. So I did try to see the first and second round. I remember when I watched Ryan Kessler. We weren't even going to watch Ryan Kessler. We went to Ohio State to watch R.J. Umberger, who we had drafted the year before. Ryan Kessler took his first shift. He must have hit 8 guys. Here's this bow-legged demon out there, skate like the wind, and cranky and ugly. And I said I was with one of our scouts, I said, where do we have this kid? And he said, we have him in a high second round, like 35. And I said, move him up right now. I think we took him at 20, I want to say, or 22. So there's value in going. The risk in going is that sometimes the snapshot is dangerous, right? So you see a guy score 3 goals in one game, and you're driving back, say you see a game in Brandon, and you're driving back to Winnipeg after the game, and it's cold, and it's pitch black. You can see northern lights. There's snow blowing across the road, and you're raving to this scout about this player, this right wing that just scored 3 goals. And he says to you, Berkey, he's only got 13 goals and it's March. You just saw 3 of them. He had 10 goals the rest of the year. He's no good. So that's the risk, is you go in and you catch a snapshot on a guy, and then you have to trust your scouts and say, well, it's the same thing your coach gives you advice on trades. So we'll play Chicago, and a player on Chicago will have a great game, and then Mark Crawford would say, we got to try and get that guy. I'm like, I saw him play twice last week. He was terrible. Just you caught him on a good night. So that's the one fear, but I like to see the top guys and get a feel for them, yes.
Speaking of top guys, so you make a blockbuster deal to get Chris Pronger, who not only is in the Hall of Fame, of course, but was a key piece to you managing a Stanley Cup in Anaheim. Did you see Chris, the younger brother of Sean, play when you drafted Sean, your first tour of duty in Vancouver, and maybe talk about the key points of, making a heck of a selection right behind Alexander Day?
Well, we had drafted Sean Pronger, Chris's older brother, when I was in Vancouver. So we knew the family, really good family, really good parents, successful business people, really good values instilled in their kids. And the scouts will tell you the birth order is important. Younger brothers, there are notable exceptions. The younger brothers tend to be better players than the older brother because they get to play with the older kids on the outdoor rink, and they watch their brother go through bantam and midget and junior. And there's way less fear and way less trepidation about treading that path because they get to watch their older brother. And Sean Pronger was a good professional hockey player in his own right. And he was on the ice the night of the Bertuzzi Moore incident. He started the whole thing. We had called him up then. And he had a great career. Sean did, because of his character, because he was tough and he worked hard. But I went up to watch. Tommy Rowe was the assistant GM in Hartford that year. So this is 92, 93, my only season there. And we went up to Peterborough to watch Chris play. And I swear to God, I think he played 50 minutes, 5-0, out of a 60-minute game. We stopwatched him from the second period on, and he played 36 minutes out of 40 minutes. Like, that's impossible. And so I fell in love with him. Like, here's this big guy, best first passer I've ever had. And he was 6'6", so he'd take one step to the left of the net and put it on a guy's tape out by the red line. Unbelievable because of the reach. He didn't even have to step out from behind the net. He just had to lean over. And he was hostile and truculent and ugly and, just my kind of player. So we had the 6th pick in the draft that year. And San Jose had the 2nd pick. And the guy they really wanted was Victor Kozlov. Not the little guy, the big guy. I think Slava Kozlov was the little one. The big one was Victor. And we didn't like Victor at all. He's a really nice kid, but we didn't like him as a player at all. And we knew San Jose wanted him. So San Jose had really bad security on this trade. We knew exactly who they wanted. They just talked too much about what happened. And it was a lesson to me that we had to always be mindful of that. We tried everything. I left a phony draft list on the floor of the lobby at their hotel. Like, it slipped out of my pocket. But the one thing we did was we knew that they really coveted Sergei Makarov. So we got Makarov. We made a trade for Makarov, and we put him in that deal. So this was a very expensive deal to get Chris Pronger, too. We gave up the 6th pick, another pick, and Sergei Makarov, who was, went on and had a couple 30-goal seasons for San Jose. So Dean Lombardi was the GM there. You're not going to beat Dean Lombardi in a trade. It's just that their scouts love this other defenseman. And they said, we'll take Kozlov and we can get a defenseman in the 2nd round that we like just as much as Pronger. So I said, okay. So we gave Makarov another pick. Again, we did this on the floor. So I was on the phone with Dean till late the night before, and he just wouldn't budge. And I said, Dean, I'm not putting anything else in this deal. I think I've put a very fair price on the table. So if you're waiting till tomorrow to see, I'm not bumping the ante in the morning. So we got to the draft. It was in Quebec City. And they're up announcing Ottawa's taking Alexander Daigle. This is before the league did trade calls. We had to go up and scratch out the terms of the deal on a piece of paper and both sign it and hand it to someone from the league. We're doing this as they announce Alexander Daigle. I go back to the table and we pick Chris Pronger. So, but Bruce Harrelson and Kenny Schinkel were our 2 top amateur guys then, and they really, really, really pushed for this. They were both like, I said, look, guys, we're passing on Paul Kariya if we do this. We are saying no to Paul Kariya, who's going to score 100 points in this league. Are you sure? And they were both like, yep, right away. So that was a really, I think that's the best one-player deal I ever made.
Wait, so if, in October, you have a book coming out, Burke's Law, Life in Hockey, and it's a blueprint of how to at least have a chance to manage and manage an elite way like you have in this league. So I want to bounce a couple things off you, Berkey. If an aspiring general manager or a young general manager in the league said, how can you best execute, not let the moment grab you on the draft floor, what bullet points of advice would you give that person? Well,
first off, the one bad thing about the Sedin deal is it's kind of killed draft floor deals. It went so one-sidedly in favor of Vancouver that when I drafted Bobby Ryan in Anaheim, I knew no one had him as high as we did. We had him at 2. But I know for a fact that other teams didn't. So I tried to trade down. And I couldn't even get GMs to talk to me. So the number one thing is you got to do all the work long before you get to the draft. With Tampa, we waited till the last minute till we got the Chicago deal because unless we had 2 picks, it wasn't worth it. But in general, for the deal for Chris Pronger, we started working on that deal with San Jose 6 weeks before the draft, 5 weeks before the draft. So you've got to do all your work. For you to make a deal on the floor, you have to have done the work before that. Very few deals happen instantaneously. Now, I will tell you one that happened instantaneously was when I got Chris Pronger to Anaheim. That draft, we were sitting at the draft, and Edmonton put 4 envelopes on 4 different tables. Scott Housen was the assistant GM. He dropped off an envelope at 4 different tables. I don't know what the other teams were. But ours was, it had a trade proposal for Pronger. It said, first-round pick, not this year. We were going to pick. Next year's first. Ladislav Smid, defenseman, great kid, young defenseman, really good, had a really good career. He had a neck injury, would have had a great career. And then Joffrey Lupul, who that year, we went to the conference finals that year and lost to Edmonton. Joffrey Lupul had been our best forward by a mile. And I said right away, okay, we'll do it. Like, that's how we were convinced our team was legit. We can get Chris Pronger, we're going to have a parade, and we did. So we did that deal right on the spot. Now, the league wouldn't let us do it because of cap situation. There's a tagging room issue. We had to wait like 5 days. But we agreed to the deal in 10 seconds. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I said to our guys, I said to Dave Nolan, you want to do this? Or Bob Murray. I said, Bobby, what do you think? And he looks at it, he goes, do it. And Bobby's a very decisive guy. We're like, yeah, we'll do it. And we did it. But otherwise, my advice is do all your work before you get there. Know what all the teams above you and below you are trying to do, what player they identified or what position. If you're not in love with a guy at your number, be willing to trade down. You know, if you're at 6 and you like the guys down to 10 and say there's a ledge. So we talk about ledges. So this year's draft, okay, there's a top player, then there's a ledge. Then there's probably 5, 6, 7 guys, depending on which GM you talk to, then another ledge. The key to trading down is don't get off that ledge. So if you like guys from 6 to 10, you got them all rated about the same, you should be willing to go to 10. Get another asset, get a second-round pick, and drop 5 places, as long as you stay on the ledge. But if you go on to the next ledge, then it's a much higher price that you would want. But do all the work before you get there.
Ricky, Scotty Bowman was on Digging In a few weeks ago, and I asked him in the Cups in Detroit, where I am right now, late 90s and then into the 2000s. I said, what was one move? Because at one point he was general manager as well as the coach. I said, what was one move the team made that was most instrumental? And he pointed to acquiring Igor Larionov because it got all the younger Russians, along with getting Slava Fetisov, to buy in. All the things that you did, you just talked about acquiring Chris Pronger. You traded a future Hall of Famer and Sergei Fedorov for Francois Beauchamp, man, who was very important to your team. What was the move for you, or something that happened behind the scenes that you think was really pivotal in eventually winning in Anaheim?
Well, I think people will point to the Pronger deal, and I think that's not respectful enough to Scott Niedermayer. So I think it's 2 things. First off, whenever we talk about the Stanley Cup in Anaheim, we got to talk about 2 people named Murray. Brian Murray, the late, great Brian Murray, left some great pieces on the table. He left Getzlaf, Perry, Jaguar. He left a lot of pieces. And then Bob Murray was the assistant GM. And the assistant GM's name is on every Stanley Cup, but I think Bob had more impact on our team than any other assistant GM. Like Sean Thornton was his guy. Travis Mullen was his guy. These are guys that were really critical to us that he pushed me to get. And Beauchamp was one of them. So Sergei Fedorov was a great player and is a really good guy, but he had really lost interest by the time we got to Anaheim. He just wasn't engaged enough for me. And so we moved him on. We were very happy to be able to move him on. Again, not a bad guy, just not engaged at the level we needed him at that point in his career. So to me, then we went out and we signed Scott Niedermayer, and then we got Chris Pronger. So people say, well, Pronger put you over the top. They both put us over the top. I don't think one move is greater than the other. They're both great players. The 2 best defensemen I ever had, and 2 of the best that ever played the game. So those would be the 2 moves. But we had so much character on that team. The only deadline deal I made at that year was to bring in Brad May. And Brad May makes your room and your team better and tougher wherever he goes. I had him 3 times, and I loved having him. So that was just a little tweak at the deadline that really helped us.
Yeah, he's a through and through Brad May, a guy's guy, and just bleeds character, Brian Burke character. I mentioned I'm in Detroit, and all the great Detroit fans out there. I can tell you because I've seen a ton of them just in the last few weeks, and I know they were very appreciative after they slept in the lottery of your poignant, honest comments. Being as good of a performer, maybe the best performer in first-round history, Brian, what would you do moving forward to tweak what the rules are of the NHL lottery in the first round?
Well, the lottery is a disgrace. Now, let's start with a disclaimer. I worked at the NHL. I love these guys. I think they get virtually everything right. Like, I think Gary Bettman has been the best thing that ever happened in the NHL. No question in my mind. Bill Daly right behind him. So this is said with great admiration and respect for the way the league is run. The draft lottery to me is an aberration that just makes no sense. Like, I don't understand it. I cannot fathom how the NHL could get this so wrong. So start the draft, football, baseball, basketball. What's the key principle? We pick in inverse order of finish. So the worst team gets the best player. The worst organization gets the most help. That's how the draft has been in every sport forever. Then we had teams tank. So we said, well, we have to put a lottery in. I agree. We'll put a lottery in. To me, when you've got a wound, you've got a flaw, you want to use the smallest Band-Aid you can use to fix that. So, okay, you could say, we're just going to we're going to eliminate the need for tanking. We're going to put all the teams 31 names in a hat and draw them and draft that way. Well, that's not fair. So to me, the right solution is put 5 teams in the lottery. So you can still tank, but your best you're going to get is maybe a 30% chance of getting that player. So you'd have 30, the next team 25, and so on. 5 teams. This year, they should have put 7 in. The 7 non-participating teams. But the fact that a team might win the lottery this year, and there's an exceptional player available, Alexei Lafreniere, the fact that a team that was on pace for 95 or 100 points is going to get that player maybe, or on pace for 85 points over a team like Detroit that had 39 points at the pause, it's wrong. It's wrong. Jersey moved up too high and got Heischer. He should have gone to a team that needed him more. So to me, it's one of these things where these brilliant people, and they are brilliant, but to get this so wrong, and not, to me, it's so obvious. So it's 2020, right? Tripp, I said the day before the draft, someone said, do you think a placeholder is going to get one of the 3 spots? I said, it's 2020. Of course someone's going to get one of the spots. I didn't think it'd be first overall, but this could turn out to be a ridiculous black eye for the league, and I don't understand it. I just don't. So people in Detroit, I think they got screwed. People in Ottawa, I think they got screwed. I think this is a joke. And if it goes to a 100-point team, it's not a joke. It's criminal. They got to fix it.
Well said, Berkey. I just looked. I'm Irish, and I got to get you out of here in the next couple of minutes. But I want to ask you a couple of personality.
I got a few more minutes.
I have a couple of personality questions for you. I'm a fellow Irishman. I have to tell you, I was playing golf again here in Detroit yesterday, and I was walking up 18, and Rod Brindamore called me, and I said that you were coming on Digging In, and he said, Tripp, I had a chance to tell Brian a couple of years ago at the draft in Fort Lauderdale, and he said he never got to play for you. He wishes he did, but having never played for you, you sent him a letter and congratulations after his 1,000th game and after he got his 1,000th point. And he said that was one of his top memories as a player in this league, considering you really didn't know him and he never played for you. What is it in your personality that made you do that? Because it was so meaningful to Rod.
Well, to me, it's like handwritten thank you notes, right? My mom taught us all to send handwritten thank you notes. So I went and watched. I'll give you an example. I remember the first scouting trip that Craig Conroy made with me when I started in Calgary. We were going to Barrie, and Barrie's one of my favorite trips from Toronto because it's only an hour if there's no traffic. It's a nice rink. There's the Kelsey's across the highway from the rink. You stop and get a soup and then go over. So Craig said, when are we leaving? I said, 4. And he said, well, the game's not till 7:30. And I said, I know, or 7. I said, I know. He said, why are we going so early? I said, because we're going to meet with both coaches. So I get to the rink at 5, usually 10 to 5. I go meet with Dale Howard-Chuck, who was coaching the Barrie Colts, and talk to him for 15 minutes. Then their meeting started at 5:30. So I go get Jody Gage, who was coaching Peterborough, I think, that night. Talk to both coaches. Who do you like? Who's playing well in this draft coming up? Who do you like? Who are the leaders on your team? You pick their brains. You have 15 minutes. It's invaluable. Send them both a personal note afterwards. Hey, Jody, it was great to see you. Thanks for giving me some time before the game. Sorry I didn't bring any luck. Good luck the rest of the year. Both coaches. And I've had junior coaches save those notes and show them to me 5 years later. Say, no one does that. No one ever sent me a note after they came in. First off, they didn't come in and see me. Or if they did, they came after the game and just said hello and shook my hand and left. They didn't come in and pick my brain. And then they never sent a note. So when I worked at the league, I started sending those notes to players that hit milestones. And I kept doing it. No matter what team I was working for, I would still send a note. I do the same thing to the Hall of Famers every year. Just a style thing. And I think people appreciate it. And I remember talking around that day. We sat it was an outdoor bar right on the beach, and we talked for damn near an hour. And I was really impressed with him. And I had always been impressed with him as a player, but I was really impressed talking to him. I'm not surprised he's had such success at all.
It moves me into, and it's a fine line. And again, for any person that is aspiring to be successful in any facet of life, Brian, how would you answer the question of being on the right side of the fence, of being confident in your own skin, but not cocky in your own skin?
Yeah, I think confidence is huge, but I also think you got to be confident but not cocky, and you got to be stubborn but not stupid. So to me, if you look at successful business people, and all I read is biographies of famous military people and political figures and business leaders. And I try to read sports books as well. So the one trait that they have, so you might have a real soft-spoken leader, you might have a real charismatic leader, a real vocal guy, and they all have success. The one thing they have in common, they have two things in common. All of them will tell you two things in common. One, they surround themselves with top people and they listen to them. No one is smarter than a table full of people. No one, not even Bettman, who I think is brilliant, is smarter than 10 smart people in a room collaborating, trying to come up with the right ideas. So that's number one. Number two is they work hard. And it's like Abraham Lincoln said once, someone said, that was lucky. He said, it's a funny thing about luck. The harder I work, the more luck I seem to have. I'm a big believer in that. Hard work cures lots of other personality flaws. If you do the work, that will cover up for the fact that you might have missed something or your judgment wasn't right. You might fill in the holes, and you inspire your staff to do it. So when you're the leader, I remember, I'll tell you a story. I was with my daughters in Calgary, and we're going into the parkade at the Saddle Dome, and I didn't have a parking space in Calgary. There were no assigned parking spaces in the parkade. And I had my own space in Hartford. I had my own space in Vancouver. So my daughters noticed that. And they're like, Dad, you don't have a parking space? I said, yes, I do. I can park wherever I want, as long as I'm the first one here. I can park wherever I want. And I had the parking space closest to the door because I was the first person to work virtually every morning. So to me, the number one thing I would say to a young GM is, I didn't do the Pronger deal alone. I had Bruce Harrelson and Ken Schinkel standing there egging me on to do it, and Kevin Maxwell, who was there, and Tommy Rowe. I didn't do the Twins deal without Thomas Gradine and Dave Nonis. I didn't do the Pronger deal without Bob Murray pushing me immediate. I remember immediate assent. I handed it to him. I said, do it. He goes, yep. Like, no hesitation. So hire good people and then encourage them to think independently. Like, I like dissent in our scouting meetings. I don't mind when a scout tells me you're out of your mind. That's okay.
Well, this is a blueprint of how to be successful at the rink, and you've done some unbelievable things as your friend, and again, a guy that has learned so much and will continue to learn so much from you. You have done some tremendous, almost indescribable things away from the rink, whether it be for being a dual citizen in the United States and Canada for our heroes, our troops, and to advance gay rights, which must touch your heart, having lost your son, Brendan, tragically. How would you describe the things that you've been able to do, Brian, in both of those capacities that are far bigger than the game of hockey?
Well, for people who are watching this who don't know, my son, Brendan, passed away. He had come out as gay a year or so before he passed away. He died in a car accident. And our family has started a You Can Play Foundation to commemorate his memory and forward the cause for the LGBTQ community. And I'm very proud of what our family's done and what I've done there. I have to admit, I was not active in the community at all beforehand. And it's been a revelation and an awakening for me. It's helped me more than it's helped the community, frankly. And the other thing is the military. And I am a dual citizen. I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, but grew up in Minnesota. And consider myself a Minnesotan. If you ask me where I'm from, I would say I'm from Minnesota, even though I was born elsewhere. That's where I grew up. That's what I consider home. Became a Canadian citizen in 1992. Like the day I was eligible. The first day I was eligible to become a Canadian, I did. And I've spent most of my adult life working in Canada, in large part, Tripp, because of the platform it's given me. You know, I was in Anaheim, I won a cup, but no one really knew Brian Burke was in Anaheim. In Vancouver, you're the general manager of the Vancouver Canucks. Guess what? People know who you are. You have a platform. So you get up and talk about LGBTQ rights. You get up and talk about giving back to the community. And so I love the passion for the game and all the places I worked in Canada. And I love the fact it gave me a platform. And I was able to make a difference in every city I lived in. And that was my goal. You know, and I used to say to my kids before my son passed away, then I stopped saying it. But I said, what are they going to say at your funeral? And who's going to come? Right? You can be like Eleanor Rigby, who, you know, dies in a church and 3 people show up because it's a little bit of excitement in a little wee town, or is the church going to be packed? So who's going to come and what are they going to say? And they're not going to talk about how much money you made. They're not going to talk about Stanley Cups. They're going to talk about were you a good dad? Were you a good brother? Were you a good sister? Were you a good sibling? Were you good to your mom and dad? Were you a good parent? Were you active in the community? That's what they're going to talk about. And that's what I've tried to teach my kids is that should be your legacy. I hope at my funeral, which I hope is a long ways away, but I hope they're talking about these other things and not Stanley Cups and not money.
And for all the parents that are listening, watching to the podcast, Brian, the unimaginable grief that goes along with losing a child or anything else that'll put you in the valley. Is there anything that you could pass along in the way of advice of how to gain acceptance and keep putting one foot in front of the other?
Yeah, fortunately, the club that we're in is a small, sad club, right? So the parents who lost a kid, fortunately, you're not supposed to bury your own kids. They're supposed to bury you. And fortunately, it's a small club. You know, it's a rare occurrence, but there's enough that I say to parents, accept that. Treasure the time you do have with your kids. I do not have to look back and say, was I a good parent to Brendan? You know, for 11 years when I worked on the West Coast, I flew back to Boston and saw Brendan and Molly, my 2 younger ones, every other weekend for 11 years. And the team never paid for any of that travel. So I flew from Vancouver and later on from Anaheim to Boston every other weekend for 11 years during the school year. Summertime, we were on, you know, a vacation schedule. So I don't have to look back and say, did I put the time in? Was I a good parent? But treasure the time you do have with your kids, because you don't know when it might end. You don't know when you might get that awful phone call. So put the right values in them, treasure the time you have with them. And then for the parents who lose a kid, the only thing I can tell you is time is the only thing that heals that wound. It never goes away, but time, the passage of time allows you to cope with the loss better and better. The key, you know, I cried every day after Brendan passed away. And then one day I remember I didn't cry. And I remembered like it was yesterday. I was like, hey, I am getting better. Not forgetting my son, I never will, but I'm getting over the grief a little bit. So time will help you. That's about it. That's about all it will help you, but time will help you.
Before I let you go, you've checked every box in the game and with your platform. But as you said, many years and hopefully several decades before that funeral that you talked about, what does Brian Burke still want to accomplish moving forward?
Well, I'm embarked. I'm in the second year, well, actually the third, because I did it for a year back in 04-05, but I'm embarked in a new career in the media, and I'm hoping to be successful at that. My book's coming out, as you know. I'm already jotting down ideas for a second book because of the stuff that I realized I left out of the first one. But I want the book to be successful. I still have a lot of charity stuff I want to do. I've done a lot with the Canadian, you mentioned this trip, I've done a lot with the Canadian military, been to Afghanistan in the war zone 3 times to visit soldiers who were there, been overseas a total of 8 times, to Kuwait, to Latvia. I want to continue to do work with that. I keep up my charity stuff. And I've done some great travel with my family, with my children. We were in Africa last summer, Italy the summer before, Paris, London, and I've exposed them to world travel. And I want to keep doing that as long as I can. This summer, obviously, we're not going anywhere, but we hope to resume that next year.
And as I've gotten to know you, you become my friend. You mentioned going to Africa. I went there on a hunting safari. You love the outdoors. You love fishing. Okay, so I was texting you on the elusive hunt for a billfish, a swordfish in particular. I didn't catch it. I hope you're with me when I finally do get one. If you could tell me your greatest fishing moment, what did you catch? Where was it? Before I let you go after joining me, what would that be, partner?
Well, last summer, I took Jeff Sanderson, who was a Hartford Whaler, scored 48 goals, I think, for me that year. I took him to Langara Lodge. So Langara Lodge is in the Haida Gwaii, which is an island chain off the northwest coast of British Columbia. It's almost to Alaska. We can see Alaska from where we fish. And Jeff Sanderson caught a 77-pound Chinook salmon, which is a whale. They hadn't caught a fish that big at the lodge in 30 years. And so that was a great moment, watching him bring that fish in. It was enormous. I sent you a picture of it, Tripp. So that was one. My biggest highlight, my best day fishing, was as a Hartford Whaler. So that year we weren't very good. The owner and I didn't see eye to eye all the time. And my parents lived in Vero Beach, Florida. They're both gone now. But so it was Tampa Bay's first year in the league. So we played Tampa. I drove across Florida in the middle of the night after the game. I got to my parents like at 2. At 5:30, I was on the dock at Fort Pierce. Chartered a boat, went out, just me. I had a case of beer and a pouch of Red Man chewing tobacco. And I show up at the boat at 6 o'clock, and the guy goes, "Where's the rest of your party?" I said, "It's just me." Start driving. So you got to go about 15 miles offshore, that far north, because the reef cuts away from the coast, and you got to fish the reef. I caught 32 fish. I caught a 55-pound mahi-mahi. I caught a bunch of kingfish, Spanish mackerel, wahoos. It was unbelievable. Caught a barracuda, and 32 fish, and drank all the beer, and came in sunburned. And one of the great days, and brought a bunch of fish home. And my dad loved fresh fish, so he cooked up some of the fish that day, and he cooked up the next 2 or 3 days, and then I kept going. But that was my best day on the water. I just needed some solitude. I needed to get away from the team. I needed to get away from losing, and it was just a great day, a great relaxing day.
How on earth? I've been trying to catch the wahoo for a couple of years. I hear it's just unbelievably good tasting. How was it?
Yeah, that's great. So I was in Hawaii. I took Patrick and Brendan fishing when Brendan was still alive, and they each caught a nice wahoo, like a 3-4 footer. And we took one to a restaurant, and they cooked it for us, and it's fantastic. It's like I would say it's like mahi-mahi, but a little firmer. Real good eating fish, real good fighting fish. That's one of the best combo fish in the ocean for fighting and eating. And great predator fish. So they're fun. I've caught, I don't know, probably a half dozen of them. But they're fun to catch and they're fun to eat.
Burke, I can't wait to go angling with you. I feel like I've already caught a sperm whale, because I have your friendship and your tutelage. It means the world to me that you dug in. I really appreciate your coming on, and I look forward to learning more from you and for our friendship to continue to age like a fine wine.
I agree. It's been a great friendship for me too, Tripp. Thank you, and good luck to the Hurricanes here coming up.
Thanks, Burke, and I know Rod listens to the podcast, so he'll be very, very flattered, and again, how meaningful it was about what you did for him, and then that conversation at that Florida bar. Thanks once again.
And Johnny Forsland's one of the top guys. I hope they sign him again.
Yeah, he's. I wouldn't know what to do without him. I mean, it's it's over 2 decades, and he did tell me. Now, speaking of fishing, I think it was with Pierre Maguire. He had a fishing trip where everybody got seasick off of Martha's Vineyard. But these are the kinds of talks that John and I have usually on bar stools as we're getting ready, watching hockey the night before games. I feel that he's the definition of elite when it comes to play-by-play calling.
Yeah, well, when I played for the Maine Mariners, 77, 78, a lobster fisherman took us all fishing one day. It was in the spring. The weather was starting to get good. We won the Calder Cup that year. And so we went and we were like, the water was like glass. And we're like, well, this isn't so bad. Then we got outside the breakwater. And now the boat's going up 3 feet, down 3 feet, and everybody got sick. You imagine there were 16 of us on the boat, I think. Everyone puked their guts out, and we had to turn around and come back in. So a bunch of tough hockey players all puking over the side.
That's awesome. Hey, if it comes to that, as long as we'll get that billfish, I'm willing to pay the price.
Yeah,
No doubt about it. All right. Well, Berkey, thanks again. Have a good one. I'll see you soon. Love you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you once again to the great Brian Burke. And I want to encourage everybody to give us honest regards and response and commentary. You can find us on both Instagram and Twitter at Dig In Tripp is our handle. We are also available on YouTube if you want to watch in video. Thanks once again to the great Brian Burke for digging in with Tripp.
We're digging in with Tripp today, yeah. Today, yeah. Today, yeah. Today.